Because sometimes, okay, if we're really honest, sometimes the cycle that we get in is that we go throughout our week, we lose that connection somewhere along the way. And we come on Sunday and we say, okay, pastor, okay, worship team, get me connected again. And we go through the motions, we get reconnected, we have a great encounter with Jesus, we leave refreshed, filled up, ready to go, we head back into our work week, our school week, whatever it is, and somewhere along the way we're losing that again. But how much deeper could we go? How much deeper, how much more of God's presence could we have if we had this revelation where we are so aware of His presence? This is what it means to live a life of worship, where every moment of every day, I mean, how many days do you have in your week, okay, being honest, that you don't even stop just to say, hello, Jesus, just to acknowledge Him, just to acknowledge His presence? You get so busy with different things going on. I've had those days. I've had those days that I'm laying down to go to sleep at night, and all of a sudden I go, oh my goodness, I haven't even acknowledged you today. But what would it be like? Can you just dream and imagine that? How much deeper we could go when we come together in our corporate times and we're not needing a certain formula or a certain song or fancy this or fancy that or the pastor to get us connected, but we are already connected. We're already connected in our relationship with Jesus and ready to go deeper and deeper and deeper in His presence. It makes me so excited to think about it. Because I want to go deeper. Don't you? Yeah. I always say that it's a fight for that connection, to maintain that connection, because it's not easy and it's something that takes time and takes a lot of energy. But you know what? When you're in love, it makes it a lot easier. Things are a lot easier when you're just in love. You know, when I first was falling in love with my husband, there's that period of time that you're like out of your mind, where like you can't sleep and you can't eat, and all you think about is that person, and every single thing out there reminds you of that person. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? When you're in love, you're just out of your mind, and it's awesome. When you're in love with Jesus, it's so much easier to fight for this connection. And here's a couple other things I just want to throw out there to kind of help in fighting for this connection. One of those is living with an unoffended heart. If you are like me, there's a couple different things here. One is, I had some different challenges I walked through my childhood, and when I formed my relationship with God and I found out how big and how powerful He is, I suddenly could not fully understand, why did the bad things happen? God, in all His power, He's so big, He's so strong, He could have done something to stop it, right? And going and saying, but God, why did the bad things happen? I've talked to lots of people over the years when I start talking about this, people who have gone through different traumas or loss and different things, and they have that same question that would burn inside of them, the why. And to be quite honest, I didn't really hear it talked about a lot in church or anywhere, because I don't know if people just really had a great answer. And I realized at some point that this is what was happening. I could only get so close to God, and I was so hungry for Him, but because my heart, I was living with this offense in my heart, this offense that He didn't look how I wanted Him to look. And He didn't show up how I wanted Him to show up. And He didn't even show up when I wanted Him to show up. And I couldn't understand why I just had that question burning. Why did the bad things happen? And suddenly, when this revelation hit me that this thing, this offense I was holding in my heart was standing in between me and him, and it was preventing me from getting closer to him. It's like I hit this breaking point where I was so desperate to be closer to him and to be closer in his presence that I just hit this moment of just breaking down, and I just said, God, I want you more than I want the answers. And it took me a long time to get there. And it was a fight. And if I'm really honest with all of you today, I'll just be super honest. That's still something I do every day. Every day I still say, God, I want you more than I want the answers. And even though I don't understand, you and I may have some long conversations when I get to heaven, but right now, here on earth, I cannot have any offense in my heart. I cannot afford to carry anything in my heart that would stand in between me and his presence. And I had to make that sacrifice to lay it down and to put it aside and say, God, my hunger for you far outweighs my hunger for understanding or the answers or to have it all perfectly clear in my head. Can anyone else relate to this? Yeah. The other thing that really helps in maintaining this connection and fighting for this connection, you know, there were so many times that I would come and I would get before God and I would just wait on him. I would pray, I would read my Bible, and I would feel like nothing is happening. I wouldn't hear anything. There wouldn't be any crazy blue angels showing up and speaking to me. There wasn't an audible voice. I wasn't being sucked up into some vortex in heaven and floating around in space experiencing Jesus. Okay, there was nothing like that. I'm just sitting there and it's just quiet and it's just me pressing into God. And so many times when we're in that moment, people have a tendency, including myself, to get frustrated, to get mad, to get impatient, to just want to walk away, to have that offense of you're not showing up how I think you should or when I think you should. And you know what I did? Every single time that was happening, this battle is kind of waging in my mind, I would tell myself, even though I don't feel anything right now, I know that one day I will live in the fruit of this moment. And that is the truth. I can say that right now, where I'm living in my life, in this moment, in this season, just being here right now, this is the fruit of that moment. Those many moments, actually, a long time ago, of hours and hours of sitting and just waiting on God and just pressing in, pouring out my heart, pouring out all that I can on him. Whether or not I heard anything or saw anything or had any radical encounter, I just kept saying, I know that I will live in the fruit of this moment one day. And I kept pressing in. These are like the two keys, okay, for this connection. Fighting for that relationship. No offense in the heart. And pressing in, knowing that one day we'll live in that fruit of that moment. And I still do that to this day. Even now in my life, when I have those moments, I still tell myself, one day I will live in the fruit of this moment. I love this. 1 John 3:18. Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. Let us not love with just words on a screen, but with action, with truth, with all that we are. Let us pour out our love on Jesus. Let's give him all that we are and all that we have, because isn't he deserving of that kind of love? Doesn't he deserve all that we are and all that we have to pour out and to give to him? This then is how we know that we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence whenever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts. And he knows everything. I love this verse. It brings me so much peace that no matter what is going on the outside, no matter what I'm feeling, no matter what kind of lies may be trying to get in, his voice is louder and his love is bigger. And he's so much bigger than all of that outside stuff. And it's so much easier to hear that, to hear his voice, to know his love, to have that moving and breathing alive inside of you when you have had an encounter with God's love. And if you have not had an encounter with God's love, I am so believing that that is gonna happen for you during our time together here. So your heart can be at rest in his presence. It's what I want every day, that my heart would be at rest in his presence. I just want to share with you guys my encounter with God's love that I had. Some of you might have heard bits and pieces of it before. But I really believe that as I'm sharing this, that God's just gonna release a grace in this room for you to have your own encounter with God's love. Whatever it looks like, however he wants to do it. I had a pretty rough weekend, and I was driving from out of town back into Redding, and it was a Sunday night, and we had a guest worship leader that night. His name's Anthony Skinner. I got in and I was walking up towards the front, and I saw Chris Ballatin, and I kind of was falling apart. I just needed a dad. And he looks at me and he knew it, he saw it, and he just went. And I ran over there and I hugged him, and I just was crying. Worship started, and all of a sudden, and let me just remind you again, okay? This is not a normal thing for me to just have these encounters, but I have one and I just live off of that until the next one. So I had this encounter. All of a sudden I see Jesus standing in front of me, and he's reaching for me like this, like he wants me to come to him. And I was terrified. I felt like I couldn't go to where he was. I felt ashamed. I felt scared. I felt like I didn't deserve to be close to him. I couldn't even look him in the face. And Jesus is completely irresistible. I always say that there are 3 things in my life that are completely irresistible to me. One is, of course, Jesus. Number 2 is my husband. And number 3 is chocolate. Completely irresistible. So, irresistible. I go to Jesus, I fall in his arms, and as I'm laying in his arms, I'm still feeling kind of afraid to really even look at him. All of a sudden, this thought comes into my mind, and I know this is not my thought. I would never, ever, ever in a million trillion years think this. And I think I need to ask him 2 questions. I need to ask him, how much do you love me? And what were you thinking when you created me? And as this thought comes into my mind, I'm thinking, no way, I am not asking those questions. Now here's what you need to know about me and why I was so afraid to ask those questions. One is, when I was a little girl, I had heard someone say something, and long story short, I got it in my head somehow that I was a mistake. I thought that I was supposed to be born a boy, but I was born a girl, and God made a really big mistake, and now here I am, just this big mistake, and I literally believed that my entire life. And to ask God, what were you thinking when you created me? I really believed that he would say to me, well, I made a mistake, and I was trying to make a boy and came out a girl, and now I'm just trying to make the best of a bad situation. I know, it sounds ridiculous, huh? That's really what I believed. It's crazy. And then to ask him, how much do you love me? I felt like he'd say, well, you're a mistake, so how much could I love you? I mean, I think you're okay. I mean, this is what's going through my head. I know this sounds crazy, but these are the kind of lies that I was believing.